and as Vice Chair of BMO US, it is my great pleasure to welcome all of you on behalf of the Executive Club of Chicago. Before we begin, allow me to thank the board of the Executive Club of Chicago, as well as the board of advisors in attendance, as well as all the members of the club in general. BMO is a proud presenting sponsor of today's program. As a top 10 U.S. bank with headquarters right here in Chicago, BMO is an active member of the Chicago business community. We are committed to the economic success of our city in driving progress for a thriving economy. When our clients grow, so does BMO. This allows us to advance our purpose to boldly grow the good in business and in life by helping more families, businesses, and communities that really make real financial progress. We value our partnership with the Executive Club of Chicago, and we're grateful to be here today. The club would also like to thank their signature series sponsors, whose annual support help excellent programs like today's possible. I'm a proud Chicagoan, born in Humboldt Park, raised in Highland Park, and have been living in Wicker Park for over 25 years. It's where my wife and myself raised our adult children, who are now 24 and 22 years old, in the same house in Wicker Park. But now, the 24-year-old works in New York, the 22-year-old works in Scottsdale, and I go, why? Look at all the great talent that we have, like in this room today. So this panel, this program, really means a lot to me personally. Our panel, Chicago Rising, Shaping Chicago's Economic Future, brings together key voices across Chicago's vibrant business and economic ecosystem. The discussion will explore the trends, strategies, and policies that are driving Chicago's economic transformation and what lies ahead as we collectively build a stronger, more inclusive, and innovative future. Not that long ago, I went to my first Chicago Auto Show about 45 years ago when I was in grade school. And I remember walking outside of the old McCormick Convention Center, and I said, one day I will work in those buildings. And I hope the future of all the generations to come, not only our people and the talent that we have, but businesses find Chicago the #1 destination to succeed and thrive. Our panel today is a good friend of mine from BMO, Michael Gregory, who is Chief Economist. We'll kick off things with expert insights into the economic forces and market dynamics shaping our region and beyond. Phil Clement, CEO of World Business Chicago, will offer a deep dive into the bold strategies powering Chicago's growth and global competitiveness. We are a world-class city, and we got to be proud of it and show the rest of the world that we are. Then bringing the real-world business perspective, we'll hear from Felipe Capella, CEO of Loadsmart, and Maria Bocanegra, President of Peoples Gas and North Shore Gas, as they discuss why Chicago is the right place for their organizations to grow and thrive. Chicago Rising. It's about the future, and it's for us to take it there. Together, our panelists represent a wide range of experience, unifying to discuss how we all play a role in shaping what comes next for our great city. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished panelists.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Please enjoy your lunch. I get the privilege of talking about the economy for the next 5 to 10 minutes, and I'll try not to create any indigestion going forward. But, as probably one of the most common questions I get these days is, what's it like, in your job as an economist with all the uncertainty swirling around? And we all know, we all see it. And there's no doubt that just trying to figure out what's happening in the economy right now, on the ground now, is itself a lot more difficult, let alone what's going to happen in the next month or the next year. And that kind of uncertainty, that angst one has as an economic forecaster, which I'm paid to do for my bank, it reminds me a lot of those first few months of the pandemic when we just didn't know what was going to happen. That's the kind of angst we're feeling. Reminds me also of those darkest days of the global financial crisis, where again, we didn't know what was going to happen. But unlike sort of the bursting of an asset bubble or virus, this source of uncertainty is very much rooted in what's going to happen to economic policy under the new administration. And there actually is a measure of uncertainty. It's called the Economic Policy Uncertainty Index. It's produced by researchers at Stanford University and the University of Chicago. And what it does is it takes a look at various measures in the media of uncertainty. It takes a look at professional forecasters. The more diverse their forecasts are, the more everyone's interpreting the data differently because of the uncertainty. They put together a number which kind of measures in one fell swoop how much uncertainty is out there. And it's been around for about 40 years. And right now it has skyrocketed. It's the most it has ever been by far. Far above where it was during the pandemic, far above where it was during the global financial crisis. So that is the high degree of uncertainty we have right now. Fed Chair Powell also talks a lot about that uncertainty and says it's sort of found in sort of four sort of general policy buckets: trade policy, fiscal policy, and of course immigration as well as regulation. And I do think when you kind of think about what's going to happen in the future, you can maybe decide on what's going to happen on these policy fronts. But in many cases, we can simply make decisions now what's going to happen in the economy or how the economy is performing based on what's actually on the ground now and where we've seen developments which are having material impact on the economy now is in the areas of fiscal policy and trade policy. On the fiscal policy side, we're starting to get the contours of what the kind of spending cuts we're about to see to help pay for, number one, the extension of the tax cuts, which, by the way, expire on January 1st, 2026. All our tax rates go up. So hopefully Congress will get its act together soon and pass that. But more importantly, how we possibly fund other tax cuts. And those kind of spending cuts are finding their way and heavily weighted on some of the mandatory spending programs like Medicaid, which means more of a burden placed on state and local governments than on the federal government. But the one that gets all the media and the one that's creating perhaps the highest degree of angst is the kind of spending cuts we're seeing being generated by the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, and the kind of wholesale changes that are being made in the way the federal government operates. Listen, spending $7 trillion a year, there's surely got to be some ways you can save some money in the federal government. So kudos for trying to find ways of doing that. But you know, the kind of layoffs and the restructuring we're getting now, particularly on the layoff side, the HR firm, Challenger, Gray and Christmas, they're actually Chicago-based. They're renowned for keeping track of announced layoffs. And they've kind of tallied about 280 or a little bit more thousand layoffs at the federal government level. In fact, in March, the amount was so high that for the entire country as a whole, for all layoff announcements across all sectors, that was one of the highest amounts of layoffs ever announced in the multi-decade history of that firm tracking layoffs across the economy. It was only surpassed by a couple of months beyond the pandemic. So it gives you a sense of what kind of potential pressure there is on the economy there. And true, it turns out that a lot of these layoffs may not come right away. There's legal challenges and things like that. So it may spread out over many years. But the one that's really most pressing, of course, is on the tariff front. Yes, we've seen tariffs come and go and come again, announced, repealed and re-announced, and it's literally, you'll get whiplash just trying to keep track of all the announcements. But where we are right now, the tariffs that are in place right now, that the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency is collecting right now, and those tariffs, of that minimum 10% on most countries, select tariffs on steel and aluminum, automobiles and parts, specific tariffs on Canada and Mexico, of course, huge tariffs on anything coming from China. And when you look at where they are right now, not even figuring what's going to happen in the next few weeks and months, you're looking at an average tariff rate facing the U.S. economy that's running around mid to high 20% range. That's the highest tariff. By the way, that is like 10 times what it was at the end of last year. And it's the highest tariff rate the U.S. economy has had to contend with in over 100 years, even higher than the Smoot-Hawley tariffs that, if some of you recall, that were around just before the Great Depression and one of the catalysts for the Great Depression. If you want to get a good grounding of Smoot-Hawley, I would highly recommend a YouTube, the film about that famous Chicagoan, Ferris Bueller, and see Ben Stein explain to glassy-eyed students all about Smoot-Hawley tariffs. Usually I show it in my presentations, but it's only verbal today. It's funny. It cracks me up every time I see it. So these tariffs are going to have, as they are now, have a drag on the economy. They have a drag on the economy because they will increase prices. Maybe not permanently. Well, it won't cause inflation, but they'll definitely increase an increase in the price level. That increase in the price level erodes purchasing power. That erosion of purchasing power hurts the economy. It hurts economic growth. At the same time, countries that do have tariffs put upon them, they're beginning to retaliate. China is retaliating. The EU is proposing some retaliation. Canada is retaliating. I suspect many other countries, once we get a better sense of the tariff landscape, may do the same. And that, of course, hurts the U.S. economy by affecting our exports. So no matter how you slice it, it's looking like slower growth and, at least temporarily, higher inflation. And that presents a bit of a problem. It's a stagflationary shock for the economy, and it makes the Fed's job a lot more difficult. And we do hear from the Fed very shortly. Not expecting any changes from them today, but I do expect we'll probably hear from them at some point before the end of this year. So, this kind of weight on the economy we're expecting to cause a net drag. We have inflation going up. We have core PCE inflation kind of peaking at around 4% from where it is right now. And we, in the economic growth that we were expecting for the U.S. for this year, which was pretty strong, slightly above 2%, we have figuring to be around 1% or so on average for the next year or two. Now, that's an average. It usually starts off coming down a little bit below that and then slowly beginning on a quarterly basis to rise above it. So by the end of next year, we should be gaining a lot more momentum. Now, that kind of weakness in the economy, kind of 1% growth, when you then sort of put that in the perspective of the Chicago metropolitan area, is going to be hard just to maintain any growth at all in the economy. So it looks like we're in for some pretty sideways at best years in terms of economic performance. And it's simply because Chicago cannot avoid what the rest of the country and the whole global economy is facing, the impact of tariffs. The other issue, there are also some unique features that maybe are going to weigh a little bit heavier on the Chicago economy. Firstly, is with this trade war with China, the state, Illinois, still is exporting soybeans to China, which will disappear pretty quick. China is going to do what they did in Trump 1.0. They will diversify some of their source. They'll go to, say, to Brazil. And that means there's going to be a ripple effect through farm incomes across the state, which, of course, will wash a little bit on Chicago's shore. But more importantly is the role Chicago plays as a hub for transportation and distribution of goods, not only across the country, but across the world. And let's face it, we're in a period now where we're going to get some slowdown in reductions in exports because of retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods. We'll get reductions in imports because of U.S. tariffs. And because of the weaker economy, we're going to get less stuff moving around the economy. So we do have sort of a bleaker outlook because of that, even in the local area. And let's put it this way, just like the whole U.S. economy, which was performing well before we ended up with this dose of tariff shock, the Chicago economy was also performing very well. So again, that momentum is we had before, I think, is a bit of a positive. Now, with respect to what can we expect going forward, we do think that we will see the Fed eventually cut interest rates. It'll be some time before the year-over-year inflation rate drops out from the impact, the tariff impact drops out. But the Fed won't wait around for a year before before it moves. It's going to wait to see those incremental monthly changes in inflation to see whether or not we're getting any sense of second round or feedback impacts. Are workers demanding higher wages because of the impact of inflation, the impact of tariffs on inflation? Are businesses taking advantage of higher price import goods to maybe pad their own margins a little bit more? Those are inflationary behaviors which the Fed would desperately not want to see. And we don't think they will see it, in which case I think by this autumn, that there'll be enough evidence in the month-to-month numbers, despite the fact will have still that elevated year-over-year inflation rate, that the Fed will feel comfortable beginning to cut interest rates. That's a positive for the economy. Also positive for the economy, unlike past recessions, the household sector, broadly speaking, is in good financial shape. Debt to income is down, debt service ratios are low, net worth is high. So once we get confidence restored a bit, once we get job market stabilizing, by the way, the job market is actually hanging in there quite well, which unfortunately that's probably going to succumb to the weaker growth as well going forward. But that's definitely a positive feature. A third positive feature is the fact that from a nationwide perspective, all of the industrial policy measures taken in the first 2 years of the Biden administration, those supporting infrastructure, those supporting investment in semiconductors, those supporting investment in clean energy products and delivery and things like that, still have a legacy in terms of supporting the economy. And I know the Inflation Reduction Act has been in the crosshairs of the Republicans since day one. But a funny thing happened on the way to taking power. A lot of the states that benefited from the support for battery manufacturing, solar cell manufacturing, are, in fact, red states, in which case the ability to maybe cut back a lot on that support may change a little bit. So I do think that will continue to be the gift that keeps on giving in the economy. So I do think once we get through this period of getting a sense what exactly is that tariff bar, I do think the minimum 10% tariff that we saw as part of reciprocal tariffs, that is going to stay around forever. That's going to be that sort of global tax that's going to be used to help fund some of the other fiscal policy measures that the administration want to have. And we'll get a whole host of sectoral tariffs. We've seen the ones already on steel and aluminum, automobiles and parts. We're going to get them on copper. We're going to get them on lumber. We're going to get them on pharmaceuticals. We're going to get them on semiconductors and eventually on critical minerals and energy. So I think that is going to be the tariff landscape, something probably on average mid-teens, something like that. So not as bad as where we are, but I think once that sort of appears, it settles down and we get used to it, and whatever kind of retaliation happens, we will begin to see the very positive features of the economy begin to rise to the surface again, and we begin to see by the second half of next year, growth remaining, beginning to look like it looked a little bit before we ended up. With respect to the Chicago economy, I do think we will obviously ride that footsteps, and there's a lot of very positive features of that. And in fact, I am not going to talk about them now because I don't want to presage anything else any of my colleagues will say. So I'll leave it at that for now. There's a lot of good news out there, and you're about to hear some. So I'll leave it at that for now, and I'll call on to our other guests. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oh, it's great to be with everyone today. There are a few cities that bring together government, business, and the civic community the way we do to problem solve on topics like the ones you just listed. Everyone filled with optimism. Look, I think the timeless phrase of a tale of two cities, which, is actually one city experiencing both the best of times and worst of times, keeps coming to mind. And, certainly we're experiencing that. And there's dynamic forces, and I don't think anyone can make a call on which ones are going to win at this moment, and that makes this work difficult. But one of the great things about my job, I'm Phil Clement, I'm the CEO of World Business Chicago, is that we're constantly having these conversations. And I've been chatting with members of the administration, U.S. senators, folks much more local. And I'll tell you, if you're sitting next to the President of the United States right now, you can't predict what's going to happen. And two different people sitting at that round table are going, is this brinksmanship? Is it for real? Is it not? Folks really just don't know. So I'm not going to start with a strong hypothesis on exactly how it's going to end up. But I think what we can do is talk about what Chicago always does best. How are we going to work through it, right? And we're going to plan for various scenarios. And our organization, World Business Chicago, has just completed a strategy. It's not published yet, but it's a document that is starting to guide our work. It's not just a vision. It is a true, explicit economic strategy based on identifying core markets where we think that Chicago has the right to win, first of all, where there's going to be strong growth, where there's job density, and places where we will compete and win. So the group that has been together as the tradition of the Executives Club, we have worked with this team. We've worked with many civic organizations. We've had Kenya Merritt, who is here, our deputy mayor, at the helm of many of these conversations. We've all the way to, I think probably the most different would be the Chicago Cubs, and our chairman's been Tom Ricketts from that organization. And we have about 100 CEOs on our board that have also been actively involved. So, basically, phase one identified the markets. It's an interesting kind of revisit. Many of you may not be familiar with the fact that in 2012 we had an economic plan. It was called the Plan for Economic Growth and Jobs. Not in that plan would be AI, would be any conversation of climate, water crisis, environmental change. So a lot has changed, but I think what you would appreciate about the way that Chicago solves problems, we didn't throw out the baby in the bathwater. We took that plan, we said we're going to refresh it, we're going to build on that tradition. So expect more to come on that, but I think the key, if we talk about our economy, is that we have identified these industries, and we've got two of them represented here today. So mostly transportation, distribution, and logistics, energy and quantum, finance and insurance, professional services, life sciences, digital tech, including AI, and then manufacturing. So I think in some of our pre-calls, we talked about bread and butter industries, and some of these things, to some degree, we can expect to live through the current crisis. But I'll come back to those in a moment. It's important to remember that Chicago does have lots of promising news, and I appreciate, Michael, that you mentioned that. So I'm gonna share just a few facts. Some of you may be extraordinarily literate on the Chicago economy. I'm sorry if I'm repeating something you know, but many people seem surprised by these numbers. So we have a GDP right now that rivals many nations. So we are exceeding Sweden and Denmark by an order of magnitude of over 800 billion or $1 billion. We're the #1 metro in the country for relocations. So thank you, Katie. So more companies move to Chicago or expand within Chicago than any other metro. And the state of Illinois is #2 on that. So together, the Chicagoland and the state are a pretty powerful combo. We have more people working in Chicagoland right now than we did in 2019. So I think you can't talk about the Chicago economy without recognizing how hard COVID was on our city. It's been hard, pandemics have been hard on cities since the implications for Rome and London, and it's a very hard recovery, but to see that employment number is pretty amazing. We're over 5 million strong, and when we win, and we win often, it's usually because an employer is looking for talent, they're looking for affordable space, and they're looking for utilities that are approachable and also affordable, and that's particularly energy and water. We are College Town, USA. So if you're in about 12 states around here, your #1 place that you're looking to move to is Chicago. We have a little blip in our economic data every year, and you'll notice it this summer, where they'll start saying, oh, unemployment is up, unemployment is up. By November, it'll be down. And that is about 100 to 140,000 students that enter our economy every year and are absorbed. And this is why employers love coming here, because these are hardworking, smart, degreed people that do amazing work. We have our central location. We have the incredible transportation and logistics network associated with that. And we have a thriving ecosystem. We have to remember that our economy is fundamentally distributed as well. So if you think of LA, if you think of a city like New York, if you think of Nashville, you can almost immediately think of an industry as well. When you think of Chicago, no single industry makes more than 13% of our economy. So that means that your customers are here, your vendors are here. If you're someone like Haven Allen here from M-Hub, he can do startup work, but he can have the larger companies that are involved in the work are also there. And you can cast a net into any industry that you need. And that ends up being super important to us. So with that, I'm going to point out that Chicagoland employs more than 270,000 people in transportation, distribution, and logistics. In energy, we have over 76,000 employees. And we have representatives from both these organizations today, and we're going to move to a panel discussion and try to figure out tariffs and everything else. So thank you. All right, so I believe this might be one of your first on-stage appearances in your new role.
Yeah,
Yeah?
I would say maybe the second.
The second?
Yeah,
Okay, we'll
yes,
kick off
yeah.
with you. Tell us a little bit about your role and what you're doing.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Maria Bocanegra. I am the new president of Peoples Gas and North Shore Gas. I started in January. You know, it's been a whirlwind, sort of those first 100 days, onboarding, kind of taking a look underneath the hood and seeing what's what. But by way of background, I'm an attorney by training. So I apologize in advance if I have my notes. It's just the natural, like, litigator in me that needs to respond to everything and have a discussion. But most of my career has actually been in public service. I've served under Governors Rauner, Governor Quinn, and most recently Governor Pritzker, actually regulating public utility companies. So it's been a whirlwind, like I said, onboarding onto this side, but there's a lot of good work that we're doing and a lot of work that still needs to be done.
A new role, but definitely some patterns that you have deep recognition of what's going on when it comes to utilities and energy.
Absolutely. You know, I think, you know, listening to some of the opening remarks, you know, our business, much like a lot of yours, is really dependent upon, you know, having constructive regulatory environments, having sound fiscal policy that enables us to access capital markets or, you know, other things in order to be able to build our infrastructure, and also having sound, you know, trade policies as we think about how we ramp up a lot of our infrastructure project that will be kicking off here in the next, you know, 2-3 years. And
I'll come back to a question about, you know, both Peoples and North Shore has a real direct impact. And so what you're doing here locally will be of fascination. All right, why don't we hear a little bit about you and your company as well?
Sure.
Felipe.
Hi, good morning. I'm Felipe. I'm the CEO of Loadsmart. So we are a transportation technology company and services, and we just help shippers to move freight more efficiently through North America. And that by doing, on one side, we have an operating system, transportation operating system that shippers utilize to do better planning, optimization, so decide if they're going to ship a couple of pallets this way or that way, or consolidate those pallets, doing procurement. So we have a marketplace in which you can select the actual provider of transportation, if it is a large carrier, mid-sized carrier, small carrier, prices, services, all the components of a procurement marketplace. Then tracking all your trucks around the U.S. and doing all the freight audit and pay to make sure that you're paying the right amounts to those suppliers. So it's a true operating system that companies use to manage their whole transportation needs, again, in the U.S. and throughout North America. And on the other side, you do have a services unit as well. So if you do not want to run your transportation yourself, you can outsource that to us. So we're going to step in and operating out of our own technology, we're going to move freight on your behalf. And we're headquartered here in Chicago.
I'm going to ask you a little bit more on that because your company decided to locate in Chicago, or how are you seeing Chicago as a space for your business?
Yeah, so the background, and funny enough, and believe it or not, I'm actually, in my previous life, I was an attorney as well. So
Recovering attorney.
yeah, so there's a trend here, right? So maybe it's a career advice. So we actually started the company back in New York around 2014. So my business partner and I were living in the city, and New York has good VC access, so we started the company as a startup. We raised some money. But because the industry was transportation, in a very short period of time, when we started to hire, right, we raised some money, okay, let's hire the talent. And when we looked around, right, we realized that it was very difficult to find logistics, supply chain, and transportation talent in New York. So we opened up a branch, if you will, in Chicago many years ago. And a couple of years later, we had hundreds of people in Chicago, and we had like 20 in New York. So when COVID hit, I was living there, so I decided, you know what, it makes no sense for me to stay in New York. I'm gonna transfer to Chicago, and here I am, and be super happy. Yeah.
Okay, so 3 different perspectives, but I'm going to ask you at this moment in time, what excites you about the potential in the economy? And
Well, that's a very difficult question for asking a transportation guy at this point in time.
Yeah, no doubt.
So yeah, I'll bring a little bit of short-term pessimism,
Okay.
but I'll end up with a bright or optimistic view. I think. Well, let me start with the optimistic side with regards to Chicago. So the reason we moved here, again, we are transportation technology and services, so we do not hold or own any assets or distribution centers or anything else. So our business is really about the people, right? It's all about our workforce, and that's why we came here. And Chicago is still very strong, and I would say the top hub for logistics, supply chain, and transportation talent in North America. So that's not going away irrespective of what happens with the economy, right? Because it's so entrenched here that truly, if you want to start again a transportation company, here's the place to be, right? So again, irrespective of short-term volatilities and my slight pessimism of what's going to happen in the next few months, Chicago is still very well positioned in the long run, again, as this transportation supply chain and overall logistics hub. If you want me to talk about the economy, listen, again, I don't have to give you my opinion. I can give you some context, and you guys can make your own decision, right? If you take a look at the life of a load, as we say, starting from a plant in China, it gets loaded into a container, gets taken to a port in China, maybe a Maersk ship picks it up, brings to LA, Long Beach, then they take the container out of the ship, leave it at the port. You have the first domestic piece, which is a drayage piece, right? A truck driver gets there, they put the container on top of the chassis, then they take it usually to a location which is within 25, 50 miles of the port that gets either consolidated, deconsolidated, and then that moves to the mid-mile, which is usually a full truckload that takes to the next, maybe a distribution center in Chicago, right? And that's just kind of the first part of it. And you can imagine that keeps on going until it eventually hits the consumer at the end, right? So the problem that we see currently is that, especially with China, if you take a look at the overall import and how much it represents out of domestic, one could claim that number is around 10%, right? Saying like all imports represented 10% of the domestic transportation market. Pick a number. It could be a little bit more, a little bit less, but let's start with 10%, right? And when you take a look at Chinese imports, they represent 13% of the total imports. So you could claim, well, 13% over 10% it's not that big of a number, right? We're talking about 1.3%. So if a business halves, we talk about 0.6% problem for the domestic market, right? No, wrong. Why? Because it is 13% of the Chinese part based on value of the goods. But when you go to volume, it actually represents 30 to 40%, right? Actually closer to 40% than 30%. So imagine that all that freight, that in the domestic market, it's all about volume, right? Of course, you have some variability and some commodity components that high value commodity ships in different ways. But in general, again, you move a full truckload or 45,000 pounds of something, it doesn't change that much, at least on the dry van side. So again, on the domestic side, volume is more important than the actual value of commodity. So then this number that started at 0.6, 0.7 can grow to 3%, 4%, right? That's an important number. Also because this is an average throughout transportation. Companies are not going to be hit equally at 3, 4%. You're going to see transportation companies that have high exposure to imports been hit at 10, 15% in terms of volume impact, right? And some other companies are lucky enough to have 0, 1, or 2% impact, right? So trucking companies, for example, do not have all this beautiful margin to absorb a 10, 15% volume impact and start running trucks half empty. So that's the problematic part of where we are today. So that's why there's some short-term pessimism. And another context is that if you guys remember COVID, which actually really happened, was not a dark dream. So all of us shifted our behaviors, right, from services, like going to restaurants, a haircut, to goods. So we started to buy a lot of useless stuff a lot of times. Some people start to remodel their homes and whatever. So there was a gigantic shift in customer behavior, and that affected a lot transportation. Why? You have a pretty set of supply, meaning trucking companies and trucks, right? And now you have a lot of demand for goods that you didn't have before. So prices went up. Trucking companies and intermediaries as well start to make a lot of money, right? And because the barrier to entry in this industry is quite low, we start to see a lot of new entrants, new trucking companies coming in, new trucks, new intermediaries. So that, because people are making money, right? So when that ended, right, when things started to open up again and we started to go to restaurants and cutting our hair again, and that went away, right? You had all this supply on the transportation side and not enough demand because demand went back to normal, right? So the past 2 years for this hardcore transportation folks has been very, very difficult, right? So a lot of trucking companies have been waiting for the other ones to go bankrupt so the supply side stabilizes a bit more, right? So they have been refinancing their debts. They have been releasing their trucks, really barely breaking even, maybe losing a little bit of money with the hopes that, guess what? Around mid-2025, the market would stabilize. So everyone in their spreadsheets was planning for that specific timing. And when you fast forward to today, right, it's not gonna work.
Doesn't seem to be happening.
It's not going to work. We're seeing that this week, Port of LA, starting Monday or Tuesday, Port of LA, Long Beach having 40% fewer inbound shipments. So we're going to start to see that this week. So for the trucking industry, especially the asset-heavy trucking industry, next couple of months are not going to be easy at all. At all. We see a lot of anecdotes of 150 truck fleets going under, filing for bankruptcy. So bottom line is that next 3 to 6 months for the transportation industry is going to be very complicated. But again, as we were closer to this balance between supply and demand, if you push supply a little bit harder off the table, things are going to stabilize. And I believe also together with the tariff conversation, tends to stabilize a little bit a few months from now. So I think by the end of the year, the scenario is going to be much better, but with a painful short-term impact. But again, going back to the Chicago angle, we're very well positioned, again, because transportation, logistics, supply chain is all about the workforce, right? So again, in my company, especially in technology, services, we want to be where the talent is. So Chicago, for the long run, is very well positioned for the rebound out of after this kind of 3-6 months of pain.
Great. We'll come back and talk about talent and workforce, which I think is so instrumental. Maria, I'm going to ask you for two things. One, I will go back to for a moment on one good idea that you're excited about.
Sure.
And then let's talk about how, the trends you're seeing and the things you're worried about.
Yeah. Well, to take the first question first,
Yeah.
I think, for us, I think the most obvious thing for all of you who are not familiar with our organization, as a company, we are celebrating 175 years in business. This year, we are Chicago's first utility. And so I think when I listen to a lot of the dialogue here already, I think it's a testament to our resilience in the face of everything that we're talking about. My friends at NICOR know that, utilities are sort of that invisible yet critical piece of infrastructure. And so I think I sort of take the opposite view of Felipe. We have challenges, no doubt, but I think what's exciting is, as we are restarting our pipe replacement program, there was a regulatory pause for about 2 years. I'm sure a lot of folks are familiar with that, but I think even in the face of that challenge, what's exciting for us is the opportunity to restart that program. And when we think about, what our role is as partners to the city of Chicago and what 2050 looks like, it really is about rebuilding that critical infrastructure and being able to contribute to that economic competitiveness, that workforce development. Now, second part, which is the challenges.
Yeah, the things you're worried about.
Yeah, things that we're worried about, and just using the pipe replacement program, there's a significant ramp up that's needed. We have a workforce shortage for us. It's really thinking about how do we find those trained and skilled workers, which we're excited about. And I think that that's what we spend a lot of time doing is how do we leverage our existing partnerships with a lot of the folks in the communities to help rebuild that.
Yep.
Simultaneously, we have looked at things like tariff implications. Fortunately enough for us, a lot of our things are sourced domestically. A large portion of our natural gas supply that, we hedge for and plan for is sourced domestically. A lot of the materials that we will be using for our projects are pretty well managed within our organization. With that said, I think someone mentioned, is there some opportunistic behavior by vendors and contractors who may otherwise may not be subject to the tariffs, yet we're seeing some price increases. That's sort of where we're really trying to figure out, how do we manage that and how do we embed that in our cost estimates. Simultaneously, I think the other thing that does worry me is, being new to the organization and being very aware of the energy transition and some of the policy priorities in Illinois is what is the role of natural gas. That's not to say I think we don't have one, we do. I think that we are here for the foreseeable future. The question is how do we position ourselves to best enable the priorities of, Mayor Johnson and Governor Pritzker, which we want to be a part of, and we have already begun those opportunities for engagement. But it's really thinking about what's the next 175 years for us look like. It's RNG, it's hydrogen, it's what does quantum computing mean for us as an organization? What's the role of AI? How do we use those emerging technologies and tools to better plan our infrastructure and be part of that transition?
Fantastic. I see you attentively listening. Any of these observations fitting into the macro economy in ways that you want to comment on?
Well, I think one thing that was there, and the mention of AI, it's mentioned by both other panelists. And I think when you and sort of think about beyond the next year or two, a longer term horizon, and the purpose, the genesis of your report. And one of the things that Chicagoland is strong in is in quantum computing, right? That's a center of excellence, recognized as a center of excellence, and then the next leg of that is when you combine that with AI. So you got on the hardware side on the quantum computing, you got the AI on the software side, And then what you combine that with is just mind-boggling. And considering all of the big decisions or big things that we're going to have to deal with climate change and the path to net zero and things like that, as well as discoveries of new medicines and all the kind of stuff that you hear about. Anything that you hear about the promise of AI is many-fold larger when married with quantum computing, and that's a center of excellence right here. So that's quite encouraging.
We are seeing, certainly when you talk about the origination of AI and the PhDs that are creating the core code, a lot of that is headquartered in San Francisco and area. But what is super interesting is at the intersection of AI and TDL or energy, you start to see Chicago emerging as a leader. And I think it is that industry diversification that really helps us at that intersection. I suspect that when you look at incubators, you're looking at investment, there's a lot running into that market. I don't know if either of you have observations on how AI is impacting your business right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say briefly that, one of the things that we've started to look at is, number one, we have to have some governance around, what is the acceptable use of AI and how do we think about that. Given that, we are an infrastructure company, there's, critical assets there that we have to be mindful of. But I think there's a lot of promise there in terms of, how do we work smarter, more efficiently. And for us, it's not really about displacing our existing workforce. It's really sort of enhancing what we already do and just doing it better, whether it's communications, marketing, supply chain, logistics, and also, importantly, infrastructure planning. But I think the other thing, too, is, we were just invited to a panel discussion thanks to P33, and I couldn't find a SME in our organization to talk about quantum because we're all still trying to wrap our heads around it. But that's the exciting part is, we left that conversation and, the debrief was, all right, how do we become quantum ready? Where do we need to start pulling from our organization? And utilities are naturally slow to adopt, and everything we do is, overseen by our regulators. And so we tend to move slowly, but at the same time, it's almost moving so fast that we need to do something. So,
Go ahead.
On our side in transportation, I think pretty much every single, if you take a look at the top 100 3PLs in the US, every single one of them is implementing AI currently. So I would think AI has kind of a threefold impact for us. One, it is automating mundane and repetitive tasks.
Yep.
Right? And it's funny because our industry is so lean and has to operate at such an efficiency level on the intermediary side that most of the repetitive tasks that we currently do are all offshored anyways. Right? So that's the reality of it. So there's no impact on workforce in the US with AI adoption in our industry at this point in time. For example, all inbound calls that we get currently from trucking partners or trucking companies trying to move freight with us, they're all now screened by an AI call, and then it routes the call to the right person with the right problem, or maybe sometimes it solves the problem right there. Hey, this load is not available anymore for this route, so thank you very much for your interest. Right, so and on the other end, you have the AI as an intelligence value prop for your customers, right? So for shippers that move freight around, we do have a product called Freight Intel AI that people upload their transportation data, and the system comes back immediately with the insights about the transportation data. Hey, I noticed that you, in plain English, right? I noticed that you're moving freight out of California to southern Florida, and you could do that more efficiently by doing X, Y, and Z. So AI has different use cases, I think, for us, but it's pretty exciting to see what's going on.
Okay, we're going to switch from deep tech and quantum and AI to simple workforce issues, and then I do have a question literally about bread and butter industries. But first, what is your when you're looking for a new workforce, when you're looking to hire, how is that interaction going with the Chicagoland community?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. I think, historically, listening to folks here, I think a lot of, oftentimes we think of utility careers as sort of more trades oriented and, maybe not sexy or exciting, but I think that, against this backdrop of everything we've said, we really are rethinking, what is our workforce of the future? And so as it pertains to Chicago, we have a lot of embedded traditional partnerships with CPS, where we're able to pull high school students into internship programs and then lead to utility careers. We work with our military veterans through Dawson Technical Institute, which is part of City Colleges of Chicago. So now we have those existing relationships, and the next is, how do we even pull further? We were just in a meeting with Care Collective about how do we take their trained workforce and help, embed them into some opportunities that we have. And 2 days later, we were able to pull 8 of their sort of workforce-ready individuals into our customer service team.
Great.
And it was just fast like that. And now, so to answer your question, Phil, it's more about, how do we take the existing partnerships and the boards that we all sit on today and just really enhance those relationships and help drive that? And even if it's not, with our organization, how do we bring them into the utility space, which, I think is very promising, given everything that's going on.
I mean, you're outstanding citizens in that area, so it's great work. And then Felipe, how are you guys looking at workforce?
For us, again, I think I mentioned that a couple of times. I think the talent is here for transportation logistics. So we're excited about doubling down our hiring focus in Chicago. We're actually trying to bring more people from the COVID era that have been hired in other states back here in Chicago to work under the same hood. So we're trying to pitch the Chicago lifestyle to our own employee audience. And for us, all about college as well.
What industry are your kids in? That we're trying to get back? Okay, all right. Okay, we'll keep that in mind. All right.
There you go. There you go.
Great. Okay, well, thank you. And then I think when we were chatting about this in advance, we literally, you brought up bread and butter industries, and then we talked about the fact that we're talking about food manufacturing, agriculture, literally bread, and dairy, literally butter. So how do you think we've got these pressures of tariffs and AI coming? What are the things we can focus on that are going to have less volatility? And how are you guys, preparing for that?
Well, I guess one of the fortes of the area has always been food product manufacturing. There's a cluster of companies and a well-defined industry, and I know food product manufacturing, particularly more basic food type products, is not considered kind of the sexy kind of manufacturing. And I'll bring up a quick story here. I have a family member who is an executive on a consumer products, food products company, and he manages the sort of the meat products arm of it. And he was looking to build a brand new factory to make good old-fashioned, deli meats and things like that. And he had a preferred location of where that would be. And most setting up, you go to the sites, you see whether you get a little special love thrown your way to help entice the decision. And he conveyed to me that his preferred location didn't want to really make any offerings in that way, wasn't really interested in that kind of manufacturing. We want high tech. We want really sexy kind of advanced manufacturing, high value added stuff. And it kind of dawned on me that, I guess that's one of the great features of the Chicagoland is the fact an extremely diverse, not a diverse economy among sectors, but within the manufacturing space itself, a very diverse economy. And food manufacturing has historically been a strength, and I think it will continue, because there's one thing that's almost near recession-proof is people have to eat, and whether it's basic food or high value-added food products, they still have to eat. So I think that's a tremendous stabilizer for the economy.
Okay. Bread and butter, stick to our knitting kind of things that you're thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I would add to that is, we really view ourselves as supporting those industrial and manufacturing processes for the foreseeable future. So that's really where I think we come in. I think in some of these other industrial or manufacturing type opportunities, again, using something like quantum, for example, we really are asking ourselves, how do we help co-optimize the electric grid? Not necessarily looking at ourselves as being displaced, but really how do we offset some of those investments that are potentially costly to our ratepayers? We are always cognizant of the affordability piece. And the other thing, it bears worth mentioning that utilities themselves are fairly predictable, market players. Our rate of return is set by the regulator. And so I think that if we're asking ourselves, what industries are predictable and stable, I would say that's fairly stable.
And without a doubt, demand going to exceed supply in the energy world in the short term. Yep. So we do need to be thinking about that broadly. Felipe?
Yeah, no, listening to that, I'm thinking about changing my focus from transportation to...
This is what we're here for. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, transportation is not that stable, I would say.
I've
Right.
got a meat company target now too, by the way. So
what is that?
Good. We're picking up stuff here on stage.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite volatile. Actually, the transportation industry has this cycle that things get, again, when trucks get out of the marketplace, things get tight, demand goes up, then you have a squeeze, and then the spot market kicks in. It's a bit crazy because it's difficult to find enough trucks to move things around. Then a lot of new entrants enter the market at that peak point, and then the downturn starts, and then we have like a depression. And this past couple of years, again, post-COVID have been the longest depression period in freight ever. Again, hopefully we can live through this kind of short-term pain of the tariff situation, and hopefully volatility gets more excited in the upward trend by the end of the year.
Okay, we're going to close on an up note, which is a little bit about Chicago vibrancy. I think, particularly springtime, we always feel like we can do anything in Chicago. People are starting to feel the buzz on the streets. You get hopeful, and tell me give me an observation. I'm going to put you on the spot about soccer, because we were watching Messi play the other day, and I thought I saw your logo somewhere there. And how would you describe the interaction between your company's sport and vibrancy in Chicago? And I'm going to ask you a little bit about vibrancy too, what you're enjoying.
Yeah, we actually decided to sponsor the Chicago Fire football club or soccer club, however you want to call it. As you can tell by my weird accent, I'm originally from Brazil, so soccer is also near and dear to my heart. And I think there are other reasons as well why we decided to sponsor the team. First, I think the Chicago Fire does a great job with local community. Yeah. They have a lot of programs for children, youth. So it's a way that we kind of give back, even though indirectly, but give back to the community as well. Second, I was really impressed with the passion that people in Chicago have for sports in general, right? And that's not an accident, I think, if you look at all the infrastructure that you guys have, all the events, right? We're talking about the NFL, the NBA, baseball, soccer, NASCAR, the Chicago Marathon, and the list goes on and on. So it's not only, it's in every people's like daily lives, right? So we thought that's quite unique to the city. And it's not only a vibe thing, it has actually a pretty important economic component as well to that angle. And of course, next year is the World Cup here. Right. So we're very excited. It's a very big event, and we think that the time is really right. So we're happy to do that.
And I think there are a series of good announcements coming on that topic. So that, which will,
Well, I'll be very excited. I heard gossips.
Yeah,
I heard gossips.
I think
I want the
we're-
formal announcement.
And Joe Mansueto and the Fire have been an incredible Chicago citizen, right? I mean, they're just doing unbelievable things for us. And in our work, we are fully embracing the fact that sport is one of our greatest ambassadors. World Business Chicago could do press releases between now and the end of time. You know, one game, one World Series will give us more of a chance to communicate with the rest of the world than all of that work. So it's a great thing. Topic of vibrancy.
Yeah, I think, we also partner with a lot of our local sports teams as well, long-standing partnerships. I think what I would end with is we have an amazing charitable contributions team. Since 2021, we've given over $20 million to a variety of organizations. It's all kept local. It's all within our jurisdictional footprint. And we really center all of that around arts, culture. I can't even think. There's like 4 or 5 pillars that we do that. But, not only has that been longstanding, and that's how we really connect to that Chicago vibrancy piece. But, as we think about 2050 is, how do we become even more aligned with local economic development priorities around those same 4 or 5 pillars and continue to do the good, work that we do. So.
Okay, fantastic. And you've only been here for a few hours this time, I think. But any closing comment on Chicago vibrancy?
A very quick one, and it'll be more in the form of a kudo to your organization, World Business Chicago.
Oh, thanks.
For someone who doesn't sort of live here anymore, but researches every once in a while, I count on what your group puts together. And in terms of vibrancy, you just go look at the scorecard of Chicago wins for the whole metro area. It is quite impressive, and the reasons why companies come here. And I think when you kind of go through that and read the list, you go, wow. This is great. This is great news. It's great information, and it does make you quite excited. So maybe that's not a sign of. It is a sign of vibrancy of the city and the metro area, but it's also it makes you feel vibrant. So kudos.
Okay, great. Well, so clearly we are in the best of times and the worst of times. But these gatherings and bringing us all together to keep pushing is the only way I think we're going to navigate the situation. So what we really appreciate everybody's time, your energy, your intellectual application to such a tough problem. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much to these expert panelists. And I think with that, I get to send you off to the rest of your day. So cheers.
Thank you.